January 1933. Adolf Hitler has taken power in Germany. He has got there by promising to be a man of peace. He has barely even mentioned the Jews. But now he can pursue his real agenda and rid Germany of his long-standing enemies.
The Jew was the enemy within, and the great Hitler, the great leader, was now pointing that out.
But not all Germans are behind him.
Many were upset by the ill treatment of Jews.
So he must find a way of capturing their minds to turn them to his way of thinking. This is the story of how Hitler and the Nazis bend an entire people to his will and groom them into participating in the most evil regime in history. A month after coming to power, a nervous Adolf Hitler takes to the airwaves. It is his first ever radio address to the German people.
Aufruf an das deutsche Volk.
Germany is in the grip of the Great Depression. Faltering at first, he describes just how serious the situation is.
Das Elend unseres Volkes aber ist entsetzlich.
The misery of our people is horrible to behold. Millions are unemployed and starving.
Hitler explains that the task ahead is massive.
Germany is suffering from the most severe crisis in the standard of living it has experienced in the entire history of the country. There are hundreds of thousands of people homeless.
Some third of the workforce is unemployed, and the knock-on effects of that in terms of poor food, family conditions, work conditions, all suffer.
There is clearly a need to come up with some kind of big bang solution to unemployment.
Hitler had won power by promising to make the economy his priority.
The Nazi slogan was Brot und Arbeit, bread and work. Basic things that the Germans had grown accustomed not to having, they promised to restore.
The task with which we are faced is the hardest which has fallen to German statesmen within the memory of man.
He signs off by asking the people to give him 4 years to achieve his goals.
He said, look, we will do what we've promised, but we need time to do so. So please give us Geduld, be patient.
But what many German people don't realize is that economics is not what really concerns Hitler. He has long-standing ambitions, which he fails to mention in his speech. Ideological obsessions dating back to his experiences in World War I and the 1920s, expressed through his writings in Mein Kampf. First and foremost, he wants to rid Germany of the Jews.
He built the party on rabid anti-Semitism.
He sees them as a global, malevolent force with no sense of nationhood, who are to blame for Germany's crisis.
This great Jewish plot to take over the world, and we Germans are suffering from that. It's an international movement, but we in Germany, because of our grim conditions post-war, we are the victims. So our way forward is to get rid of the Jew.
Within weeks of taking power, rather than tackle unemployment, Hitler targets the Jews. A nationwide boycott of Jewish-owned shops and businesses sees brown shirts man the blockade. But it doesn't go well. The reaction of the majority of Germans is not as expected. They keep going to Jewish-owned shops. The German people simply aren't interested in Hitler's brand of anti-Semitism. A report from an American diplomat in Leipzig summarizes the effect of the boycott, describing it as
unpopular with the working classes and the educated circles of the middle classes.
The blockade is called off after just one day. The clear lesson for Hitler is that if he is to win over the Germans to his way of thinking, then he must first gain their confidence and do something about the economy. As a result, he won't mention the Jews again for 4 more years.
This isn't because he's gone soft on the Jewish question, but because he knows that politically there's more to be gained by a softer approach than by a harder line. He remains resolutely anti-Semitic, but publicly he's careful not to make that a major plank in his programme. It's for public consumption, essentially, the apparently softer line.
Along with his propaganda mastermind, Joseph Goebbels, Hitler devises a new plan to win the hearts and minds of his population. They unveil a nationwide battle for work, financed by a 1 billion Reichsmark economic revival program.
He draws up plans for road building, for construction works, for training young men who are unemployed, training them in ways which are socially desirable.
A massive, high-profile construction drive begins. Goebbels makes sure the propaganda cameras capture the Führer leading from the front.
Hitler himself makes a great show of appearing on building sites, moving earth.
Next, Hitler reforms the inefficient German labor market with another policy. His answer is the new German Labour Front, the Deutsches Arbeitsfront.
On the surface, the Labour Front is the new form of trade unionism. They would work together, wage rates, income, profits would be discussed communally, and compromises reached that would benefit everybody.
Ostensibly, it looks like labour reform, but it is actually a smokescreen that allows Hitler to take on a new target: the trade unions. Prior to coming to power, he has always seen them as communists, an enemy almost as hated as the Jews. He also thinks they are a threat to the status quo of the nation, placing too much power in the hands of the workers. So he shuts the trades unions down. Their leaders are arrested and their funds stolen. All other unions are outlawed. Employment or trade becomes impossible without a membership card.
It was the control of the workforce from above. It was the Nazi determination not to allow workers to be a disruptive element in German society.
A year in, Hitler's regime is going to plan. He is seen as a man of action, selflessly dedicated to getting the nation working again. He is offering a modern, exciting vision of the future, and is successfully steering Germany out of a crisis. Unemployment is in sharp decline, down to 4 million from 6 million.
National Socialism infiltrates all kinds of areas of daily life, whether it's in voluntary organizations or in professional life. People came into contact with representatives of National Socialism.
Nazism now becomes present at every stage of a German's life. Youngsters in particular are targeted to make them subscribe to the vision.
What Nazism tried to do was try to become the political wing of the German people as a whole. And if you're going to do that, you're not necessarily going to convince the older generation. But what you can do is start absorbing the younger generation into your movement. So if everything you do is through or for the party, then you will become a good little Nazi. So what's the best way of doing that is don't have a Boy Scout movement, have a Hitler Youth movement.
Abolishing, while he did it, similar rival youth organisations like the Boy Scouts and various Catholic and Protestant religious clubs and groups. They all were put together into a Hitler Youth for boys and young men and a Bund Deutsche Mädchen, a League of German Girls for young women.
Central to the sense of communal identity are uniforms.
Uniforms are a fantastic vehicle for bringing people together as a group, for giving them that sense of belonging to a special community.
These new Nazi organizations are fun. For the first time, youngsters can explore their fatherland and taste adventure. Weddings were Nazified too. Newlyweds receive a copy of Mein Kampf on their marriage day. The party's reach even extends to the workplace. A massive workers' movement, Strength Through Joy, is launched to offer benefits to workers, like trips and holidays.
Strength Through Joy was one of the most successful Nazi organizations in propagandistic terms, providing leisure programs for workers, helping them to relax, to enjoy life, and simultaneously to indoctrinate them into the spirit of fascism.
They're allowed to go on holidays at 50% below the market rate. Cruise liners are created as well. Also, state-of-the-art canteens are built in every factory. Even little orchestras go on tours around these factories as well.
The propaganda message is clear. The Nazi Party will look after you and offer you a world of promise. The Germans buy into this dream of exciting new opportunities. But what they may not realize is that all this is part of Hitler's secret agenda. Because there is a flip side to the Volksgemeinschaft. Hitler's vision differentiates clearly between those who are inside the community, and therefore of pure German blood, and those who are outside it, like the Jews.
It was also powerful because it had a very clear barrier between those who belonged to the national community and those who didn't. So it made you feel valued, and it had easy scapegoats that you could blame problems on when they were not part of the national community.
That is why the Jews could not be part of the folk. It was exclusive, because it was Aryan, it was principled, and it related to the glorious past and offered the glorious future.
The Volksgemeinschaft is the first stage in a slow process of capturing Germans' minds and making them view the Jews as an underclass. In time, Hitler and his inner circle will use this to make the Germans complicit in appalling crimes. But for now, they must remain patient. After a year in office, things are looking good for Adolf Hitler. He is turning around the economy, creating an exciting new social model for Germany, and opening up the country via the autobahns. Above all, he is getting Germans working again.
Unemployment falls by 33%. So this is something that he can trumpet towards his supporters and say, look, I fulfilled one aspect of my programme. Unemployment is going down.
The official line is that unemployment is down due to flagship schemes like the autobahns. In fact, another force is at work. Many of the new jobs are down to something else. Hitler is secretly preparing for war. Starting in 1933, the Nazi regime spends huge amounts of cash on weapons. 35 billion Reichsmarks. It dwarfs all other forms of public spending, including all the work creation schemes. It fits into another part of Hitler's real agenda. In his mind, war with Russia is not only unavoidable, it is necessary. Ever since the days of Mein Kampf, it is Hitler's profound conviction that communism is a threat to the world. He regards it as part of an international Jewish plot, and he thinks an armed showdown with Russia is inevitable.
Hitler's ambition, or his expectation, if not ambition, is that at some point there will be a war. The Soviet Union will have to be faced down militarily at some point. Our first duty is to rearm, to make the nation strong through military means.
Rearmament will also allow him to realize another of his aspirations conceived years earlier. The idea of Lebensraum, or living space, which he believes is essential for the German nation to grow.
Lebensraum is the idea of living space, that Germany really has too high a density of population. There are too many people occupying too small a space, and therefore that's restricting Germany's economic development, especially in industry, but mostly in agriculture.
For Hitler, territorial space will solve the nation's economic problems and help feed his people. And he believes the land he needs can be seized from those he views as inferior.
From Poland on, Europe was Slav, and the East is Slav, therefore we have the entitlement to take it over. So Lebensraum, living space, which we Germans need, will be found most prominently in the East. As a superior people, they could take land occupied by inferior people.
The problem that Hitler faces is that any talk of going to war to win land is appalling to most Germans. He has been elected as a man of peace who promised not to go to war. Memories of the horrors of World War I are still fresh in people's minds. 2.4 million of their countrymen were killed. Hundreds of thousands were wounded. So this presents Hitler with a problem: how to sell rearmament to the Germans. He comes up with a justification. It's not about preparing for war, it's about the restoration of German pride.
So this is a great program. It's not suffering, fellow Germans. It is an advance towards our providential destiny, the greatness, the restoration of the greatness of Germany.
Rearmament, Hitler says, is an antidote to the humiliation of the Treaty of Versailles. Signed by the Allies in 1919, the Versailles Treaty is when the Allies made Germany pay for World War I. It also restricts the size of the German armed forces.
Germany was required under Versailles settlement to limit its armaments production and to limit its army to 100,000 only. But he calculated, correctly as it turned out, that if he pushed hard enough, there wouldn't be a response.
In March 1935, Hitler introduces conscription. It is in total defiance of the Versailles Treaty. The army swells from the permitted 100,000 to 500,000 men.
He's allowed to get away with it, and that gives him more and more confidence. So rearmament is a great way of Hitler pushing the boundaries forward.
Publicly, he continues to reassure the people that he doesn't want war. He is rearming for the preservation of peace. In a speech on the 16th of March 1935, he makes this promise crystal clear.
The government renews its resolve before the German folk and before the entire world that it will never stop beyond the bounds of preserving German honor and the freedom of the Reich, and in particular shall never make of the German national arms an instrument of warlike aggression, but an instrument confined exclusively to defense and thereby to the preservation of peace.
Hitler then goes on to explain his plans for military expansion.
Step 1. Unite the German-speaking people, many of them incorporated into countries like Austria and Czechoslovakia in the carve-up of Europe after World War I. Step 2. Move east and seize territory in Poland, Ukraine and Russia so that the German people can have extra living space or Lebensraum. It's a dream he's been nursing for nearly 20 years. Many of Germany's generals agree with him. But then Hitler spells out his timetable. German troops should seize Austria and Czechoslovakia, possibly in less than a year. The countries further east would rapidly follow over the next few years. It's a hugely ambitious program. The assembled generals are alarmed. Europe's frontiers are formally guaranteed by the military might of Britain and France. To his military commanders, Hitler seems to be rushing the country into a suicidal war.
And when they leave the meeting, there is considerable distrust and disquiet. What really worried them was that they didn't believe that the German army, that the German armed forces at that stage in late 1937, early 1938 were ready for war. Indeed, they thought that they were woefully unprepared.
Yet Hitler faces an obstacle. The German public has elected him as a man of peace. How can he fulfill his expansionist plans, seize new territory, and still keep his promise to them? In the spring of 1938, Hitler launches phase 1 of his expansionist plans. German troops pour across the border into Austria. They're greeted by cheering crowds.
The Austrians welcomed Hitler and the Nazis into Austria. Many millions of them were Germans by birth, German by upbringing, and they were only too happy to return back to the Reich.
Within days, Hitler arrives in Vienna to claim Austria for his new Greater Germany.
There are wonderful photographs of him addressing 250,300,000 people in the Heldenplatz, the Square of Heroes in the middle of Vienna.
Annexing Austria, even peacefully, is a blatant breach of all international agreements. Yet Britain and France do nothing. Hitler has judged the situation very skillfully. He's gambled on their reluctance to go to war, and won. In Germany, there's also jubilation. Hitler has taken the first step in creating his Greater Germany without bloodshed. In doing so, he's also kept his promise to his people not to take the country to war. The Nazi propaganda machine pumps up the achievement.
The crowds were euphoric. They saw this as being a bloodless invasion that, almost without a shot being fired, Hitler had reintroduced Austria back into a greater Germany. He was a hero at the time.
Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda minister and close confidant, speaks for many when he writes,
"The Führer is wonderful, a real genius. He sits over maps for hours and broods. It's stirring when he says he wishes to live to see the greater Germanic Reich again."
Yet behind the scenes, Hitler and some of his closest collaborators are planning another aggressive expansion of Germany's borders. Five months after the annexation of Austria, Hitler masses troops on the border with Czechoslovakia and threatens an invasion. The country has a large German minority. Most of them live in a border area known as the Sudetenland. They are the next target on Hitler's shopping list for incorporation into a new Greater Germany.
He felt that the German people had the right to live together in one large nation state. Hitler simply believed this was an entirely natural and just cause, and he had absolutely no hesitation in making this the centerpiece of his foreign policy.
But unlike the Austrians, the Czechs aren't willing to give up territory to Germany. Furthermore, Czech sovereignty is guaranteed by France and supported by Britain. Hitler needs to somehow maintain the illusion to the German people that he's a man of peace. If there is conflict, it shouldn't be seen to be of his making.
So there's a sense that this is a new dawn, a new age that provides exciting new opportunities for a lot of people who are very happy to go along with the violence that accompanies all of this.
Germany has been rearmed. Hitler's enemies, like the Jews, can be persecuted with minimal resistance. Now, he is ready for war.